everyone. Welcome back to Camp Conversations, the podcast where we speak to frontline caregivers. I'm so excited because I have been wanting to speak to a teacher about the spark that brings them to the profession and how they keep that spark alive, because we know that teachers have some of the highest burnout rates, but it has been quite challenging because it is actually quite difficult for teachers to come onto a podcast because of their legal requirements and ethical requirements about what they can and cannot share. So we have Rachel here today to share with us what brought her to the profession and what keeps her going and helps her avoid that burnout piece in spite of all of the challenges that teachers face in our public schools in these current days. So thank you so much, Rachel, for being here. And again, we are not sharing Rachel's image, and we are not sharing her last name out of respect for her privacy. So Rachel, I just want to start off with hearing from you. You're an elementary school educator, and I want to know what brought you to education?
Big question for me. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to teach, but the reasons I wanted to teach have changed as I've aged and through my experiences. So growing up, my mom was also a teacher, and in the summers, it's hard for her to set up her classroom and get everything organized before the year starts. So she would often bring my sister and I into the school and have us set up the bulletin boards and make the anchor charts and get the classroom looking ready for when the kids come on their first day. And I feel like I'm a fairly creative person, and that sparked my interest right away, thinking, wow, this is something you could do. You can make an entire wall and color it however you want, and this is your job. And so that to me was really exciting when I was young.
Yeah.
But then as I got older, my experience of school changed. I was never a strong learner, and I found that school was hard. And I remember there were many nights at the kitchen table with my dad, because my dad, as an engineer, is very math-minded, and I was very not math-minded. And so I found it very challenging through the years, and he would sit down with me and sit at the kitchen table while he'd be making dinner, and he would be helping me with math, and we would be having arguments about, how did you get that number? And he goes, well, I did this first. And I said, how did you get there? I don't see those steps. And it would be probably 2 hours of tears and yelling, trying to understand how to do it. I was also going to resource for reading, and it was just really challenging. And I remember thinking, this shouldn't be this hard. Why is it hard for me? And it isn't hard for everyone. Why is this so hard? But both parents were such academics that the pressure to continue in school and continue to go to a post-secondary was really important. So the pressure for me to keep my grades up was, I don't think they were doing it intentionally, but I internally felt the pressure. And so I would have to come up with creative ways of how to learn. And eventually I would have all these different strategies that I was never taught, but self-learned. And so as I was getting older, I was thinking, maybe that's something I can do. Maybe I can start teaching these strategies to other people, because we don't all see things the same way. And so that was intriguing to me. Maybe I could help kids who are struggling like me. And so then eventually I pushed through, and I went to university and majored in English and did all the things. And during that time, I started volunteering at different schools, and I got a part-time job at Boys and Girls Clubs. And then my opinion changed again, because while I was at Boys and Girls Club, it was before and after school care. And I learned that not every family is as nice as mine.
Mm.
I was pretty fortunate to have such a lovely family that all got along, that cared for each other. And the reality is, not every family is that. And so my opinion changed because it made me think, these people at Boys and Girls Club, these are the only faces that they see sometimes that show them that there are caring people out there, or they are trusted adults, and they are the ones that love them, and there are ways out of the life that they have. And that became really meaningful to me. And so I don't know, my opinions have changed over time. Currently, my mindset is, because COVID became a real challenge. It was really challenging for kids to show up, because online learning was not fun. That was challenging for teachers, but it was harder for kids, especially the ones that don't have internet access. And they're at home all day. And so now the atmosphere in schools have changed a bit. Their attitudes towards schools have changed a bit. And my goal is to make learning fun. I just want them to enjoy being there. I want them to realize that, like, you're going to be learning for the rest of your life. This is something you do every day. So you got to enjoy it. So let's figure out ways to make it so they do enjoy it and they don't shy away from it, and they continue to grow even as they pass through their academic career onto a career later in life. So
You bring so many great points there that I just want to touch on. First, I have two questions though. Resource. What was resource for those listeners that don't really know what that is? You said that you went to resource for reading.
So when I was a kid, it's very much changed since then. But when I was a kid, for students who struggled with reading or writing, would be pulled out of class and have a small group in another room with a few other kids and a teacher, and they would focus on some different strategies on how to tackle words and so then it would bring them back up to grade level with that hope.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to just hold that one for a minute because it has changed.
It has changed.
Yeah. And I think we can circle back to that one because I think it ties into how we talked about teachers are some of the highest when it comes to burnout in the profession. So we'll keep that kind of resource piece here. And then the other one, Boys and Girls Club. Tell me a little bit more about that. It was an after school and before school program. And it sounds like for some, there was a variety of reasons why kids would attend that.
Yeah. So Boys and Girls Club is it holds a very special place in my heart, actually. It's a pretty amazing program. It could be a summer camp in the summertime.
It's
some parents,
big brothers and big sisters as well, like similar youth.
Yeah, it would be similar. It's in a building. It would be similar to a daycare. But I don't want to call it daycare because it's so much more than that. Mm-hmm. There's so many different leaders that work there, and each leader is specialized to have a program based on the age that those kids are. And so the similar ages play in a gym, or they might go on a hike somewhere, or they might have an art or craft. But it is a space for them to go after school, before school, and summer camps and things. But they are located, I'm pretty sure, all over Canada. But it is a pretty spectacular program.
Yeah. And it gives you a different relationship than you get with kids when you're doing your education degree, because it's more focused on the relationship and you're not trying to move them up certain steps in
Yeah.
academic career.
Yeah, they become more of a place to play and have fun and experience things that maybe they don't get to experience somewhere else. So we did all sorts of things. They did a cooking school. It was pretty amazing.
Cool. And for you as an educator, did you find that that really helped you hone in on your um, communication skills and relationship building skills and kind of even behavior management because it's a different way to interact with kids?
They have their training for their leaders is pretty excessive.
Mm,
So I really appreciated a lot of the learning I learned, learning I
mm,
learned for behavior management came
mhm,
from there.
mhm.
They have, I forget what they called it, a five star program. I'm not sure. A high five behavior program.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of the training was based on how to speak to a child who might need some redirecting or
Mm,
um, things definitely not to do. Like we don't do timeouts, we don't do
mm,
yelling, we don't. So there's things that you very clearly do not do, but also how do you redirect the behavior in a calm and effective way that's not going to heighten the situation rather than just cool it down and have a one-on-one conversation to reach their level
yeah.
where they're coming from.
I love that. Okay. I want to tie all of these together because we've talked about how you had the experience firsthand as a kid going to the resource center. And then you had this addition to your education of becoming a teacher. And I mean, your name came across my desk because our whole piece at camp is that we work from a needs based approach to behavior. We don't look at the behavior and think of ways that we can change that behavior with external pressures. We understand, well, why does we first explore why does that behavior make sense? And you do that so well. And then your last piece is I want learning to be fun. And in my clinical practice, I think this is a question parents have for me so often. And I was a teacher that burnt out. And so sometimes I feel uncomfortable answering this. And so instead, I answer it from a personal place as a parent of what do I want my kids to get out of school? And parents often ask me, like, what should I care about? Because by the time I see people, usually they've had some challenging interactions with school. Um, Not all cases, but sometimes. And I always say, what I really care about for my own kids is I want them, one, to enjoy the learning process because the way that the world has always been changing from the time like we went to school to the way um, we were trained to interact with the world that has evolved, but now we're seeing that at supersonic speeds. And there's no way we can teach them everything that they need for their interaction with the world. So I want them to enjoy learning so they're always doing something new, always evolving their approach to learning, always exploring for new knowledge. And I want them to have critical thinking skills. And so I love hearing you say, first and foremost, I want learning to be fun.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important because they also, if they're not enjoying their time, if they're not enjoying learning, then why are they going to show up? And why would they want to graduate grade 12? So
Mm-hmm.
if they are starting out with a really negative ideology of what learning looks like,
Mm-hmm.
why bother finishing school at all?
Or if you, I think an experience I often had was feeling like when I struggled with something, it had something to do with me personally and that I was dumb. I just didn't have that kind of brain. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That really prevented me from, it created blocks into how comfortable I felt learning material in areas that I didn't think I had the right brain for. And it wasn't until graduate school where I learned new strategies. And that's where I'm so drawn to you and your education practice, because I didn't figure that out till graduate school. I struggled my way all through school, all through undergrad, and in graduate school in learning child development, figured out my learning strategies. And I was lucky enough and privileged enough to have a support system that helped me through that struggle. But like you said, in there are so many families and so many kids going through our systems that don't have that support around them. And so when they build that idea of, I don't have the right type of brain for this, or I don't have the learning ability for this, that leads to our dropout rates or our giving up. Or
Yeah, one of the things I do in the first week of school is I usually make success criteria for how to be an A+ student.
mm-hmm.
So how are we going to be successful in the year? And none of it is getting good grades. It's never talking about that. One of the things that
I got really scared when you said that. I was like, an A+ student?
yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, so I never put that in there. And it's never about grades. And I always put in needs to make mistakes. So if your kid is not making mistakes, then they're not learning. And I feel like they need to make the mistakes to know how to correct them. They need to make mistakes because it means they're trying to think outside of the box and they are critically thinking about whatever is being taught around them. And so if they're not making mistakes, often what's happening is the students are just repeating what I have told them. And I don't feel like that is them critically thinking about the information. And so I make sure that they are comfortable to make mistakes, and there's never laughing about it. If somebody makes a mistake and another student laughs, we do have a conversation about how that can be really harmful to someone when they're trying to learn, because it's a huge part to learning. There's not a single person in this world that has not made a mistake, whether reading a word funny or doing a mathematical problem. They're inevitable, and they need to know that that's okay. It should happen. It's normal to happen.
Yes, and now that I'm on this entrepreneurial journey, I'm fascinated with research around entrepreneurs and what makes them successful and not successful. And the main tidbit that I keep seeing come up is those people that come into the journey that have had the most doors closed in their face. And when I say doors closed in their face, it can be everything from making mistakes to presenting an idea and someone shutting it down and getting back up. So the people that have had the most doors closed in their face and had either support networks or encouragement or whatever that might be to get back up and learn how to do that have a higher rate of success. So we really, really want those failures. And I can honestly say, as a parent, they are so hard to watch.
That's so hard to watch.
And as an educator, it's so hard to watch because we're like, our day would be so much easier if I could just
do it.
Yeah, and spoon information and just get you to do this worksheet and help you through it and then move on, right?
There's oftentimes, if they're working on a math problem, you watch them make the mistake. And I sit back and I watch them and I wait and see how they respond to what they're doing. Because often later in the problem, if it's a multi-step question or they need something from a previous thing, they're going to realize I've made a mistake. And so it's interesting watching how they go back and correct or how they check to see the mistakes that they've made. And I don't want to correct it right away because I want them to be able to self-identify when those mistakes are made. And it's really hard to sit back and watch because you're like, no, that's all right. You're going to make this so much harder for yourself. It's a huge part to their learning.
Mm-hmm. And I think that ties back to the piece that you shared about your own parents, right? Because they were academics, it sounds like, and they were in the role of teaching and educating. So they wanted to support you in gaining that knowledge quickly and effectively. And yet, what we're seeing is that sometimes that quick, effective strategy of really pushing people through, pushing might not be the right word, but helping them get the information without the failures isn't always the most isn't always is rarely the most effective way to help them learn the material and look at it critically and start creating new ways to solve the problem.
Exactly. And I do want to clarify. I'm not watching them until they're blue in the face and crying and frustrated because they've made a mistake. If I can see that they are stuck and they're really needing some assistance, of course you're going to step in and help them and guide them into the right direction, but you're not just giving them the answer.
Okay. Can I ask you one question from a parent perspective?
Of course.
If I'm the parent, and I honestly personally struggle with this, if I'm the parent and I'm supporting them in doing some work, so let's say that's reading or writing. I remember as a kid, and I don't know if this was just my teachers or if this is an older style or what. I remember loving journal writing, and I remember loving reading. I hated spelling because that was something we were always assessed at, and I was scared of doing spelling tests. But in journals, it wasn't until around grade 5 or 6 where my teachers really started correcting how I was spelling within the journal. They more focused on my overall message and how I was sharing like a beginning, middle, and end, how I constructed the story I was sharing with them. And so as a parent, I find I default to that with my own kids because I'm very scared of making them hate writing or hate reading by correcting every little mistake. And I'm letting them kind of learn it as they go. And I'm also okay with the teacher being the one to correct them. So then I continue to be the safe space that kind of is their ally in overcoming this challenge. What would you say to me if I was a parent of a student in your class?
If you were the parent,
Mm-hmm.
I would say continue letting them enjoy it at home.
Okay.
Because I feel like the more experience they have with things,
to be really successful academically.
Yeah, I feel like the more that they enjoy it, the more they're going to do it. And the more exposure they have to it, the more they'll improve. I think there's a lot of learning in the classroom in regards to the sounds and the word segmentations and of course at home if you want to correct them you can, you're more than welcome to, but I wouldn't make that the focus. School, in my opinion, this is not a professional and not what I'm told to do, but I feel like at home at home learning should be fun. School is when you are learning a specific skill, but at home I feel like that is their safe space, and you just want them to figure themselves out and learn what works for them. What do they like? What do they not like? And if they're writing on their own without being prompted to, that's pretty amazing, because there's a lot of kiddos that aren't interested in sitting in one spot for a long time and doing one activity, especially now with so much screen time, right? There's so many other things that they could be doing. And so if they're liking it, encourage it.
Yeah, let them love it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for bring peace to my mother heart. And I want to circle back to the resource, how when we were kids, I remember this too, that we had the resource classroom where we went for additional help. And for me, that was always spelling, which is why I think I'm still quite uncomfortable with spelling. I mean, even when I was a teacher, I would say, like, guys, this is something I really struggle with. And I always felt like I had to explain myself as struggling with spelling. Now we don't have the resource classroom, or we didn't when I was teaching. Has that changed?
I think that is different by province or board. I'm not sure. Um, my experience is a lot of it has been moved into the classroom. So we're trying to keep everyone in the classroom as much as possible and not try to remove unless there are some larger gaps in their learning. But there's a lot of in-class learning happening with guided groups and I'm trying to think of the word. I can't remember the word. But there's a lot of, so there's some programs that teachers are using that are specific to word sounds and letter choices. And it's a lot of on the teacher to incorporate how they're going to be closing the gaps. That's not to say there isn't another teacher as well that would be similar to a resource teacher when I was growing up. And their job is to come in and also do some learning with those kiddos as well.
But what we're honest about it, though, and I mean, I can say this, is that as a teacher, there were specialists that could support me, but that specialist carried a massive caseload.
Right. Like there are some schools that have up to 800 kids in there. And so if there's only one or two of those teachers, that is a huge number of students that are going to require their help.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a lot on the teachers to take on for them to sit in the classrooms and do those groups and try to catch them up.
So then if we could pull this back to the burnout piece that we focus on here, is I think the other thing that I hear reported back from so many teachers that I talk to is that not only does it feel like the complexities in learning needs are increasing, and some say maybe they're increasing, maybe they're not increasing, maybe we do a better job at identifying them, which is why it feels like there are more learning needs, but we aren't seeing, it doesn't feel like we get increasing amounts of support in addressing them, because there just aren't that many teachers available that have those specialties that can rotate to that many classrooms for that many hours. And then I think the other piece that I hear about often is that behaviors, challenging behaviors in the classrooms, in addition to diagnoses and mental health diagnoses, feel like they're increasing. And before I did graduate school, in addition to my education graduate school, I didn't have any training in behavior management. And that was one of the biggest pieces that I found when I stood in front of a class, was that it wasn't just the educational material I had to approach first. And so I'm curious, do you, and answer this how you can, but does it feel like there is increasing challenging behavior or increasing number of kids that need special support for diagnoses around ADHD or autism or mental health, anxiety, depression?
I do feel like I've seen an increase in diagnoses
Mm-hmm.
or diagnoses.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of behaviors. I think there's a lot of factors to why those behaviors come to the forefront.
Mhm.
It could be there are some mental health needs and the supports for kids with whatever's happening at home, or maybe their parents are divorcing, maybe there's other things happening. Um,
Mhm.
and so they're experiencing some pretty significant emotional things. And depending on their age, they might not even be able to process what's happening. And so the outbursts could be because of what's happening at home for their mental state,
Mhm.
and not knowing how to express that. And I know that there are some supports that are given to us for that, but I don't think there's enough funding to have as much as what's truly needed.
Mhm.
We also have students who have disabilities, and depending on the varying level of their disability, they are in the classroom. And so we have kids that are nonverbal or constantly stimming because they have autism, or maybe they have visual hindrances, so they can't see, and we have to have um, speakers in the ceiling for kids with hearing aids. And there are so many factors. Um, and we also have kids that are diagnosed with learning disabilities on top of those as well. And so then you're teaching students an entire class of one grade. And as you get older into the older grades, there's such a range for those students to have gaps. Maybe that you have someone learning still reading at grade 1 and somebody still learning at grade 5, that maybe to one lesson you have to plan for 7 lessons, because
Mm.
you have 7 different levels in your classroom that you have to accommodate for. And that becomes a challenge in itself. And there are, like I said, there is some funding and there are some supports for that. However, I don't think there's enough funding to support the amount of kids that need it.
And I think often it's on the teacher or the parent of a kid, correct me if I'm wrong, to really search out and advocate for that, or it can feel that way. I'm just thinking, I actually did my teaching degree in New Zealand, and felt there right away I was assigned a mentor. And as soon as I began teaching, you had to check in with that mentor. Same thing when I began counseling. I have always had a supervisor, and you check in regularly. And so that all that information is brought to you. When I found I started teaching in Canada, I kind of started my first day in front of a class and I was like, where's my mentor? Like, I have to search out this person, and I have to search out the answers and what funding I can access and what is available. I found that really, really challenging. And one thing I would love to advocate for, and I'm curious if you feel similar, is to have that mentorship program. And I did have exposure to that as a teacher at one point, where you could choose to sign up for it. But there, in choosing to sign up, there was almost some hesitance by many, because it felt like you were admitting that you needed help. Whereas instead of having it assigned to you and it just being a normal part of your profession, it, so I would love to advocate for better mentorship.
That's really interesting. Where I'm from, we don't have an option for a mentorship. Once you get hired permanent, you are entered into a program for new teachers, and there is extra PD, and you are given a mentor of a teacher in your school.
PD development.
Yes, sorry. So you do extra learning, and then they also have given you usually an experienced teacher in the school system, and then they can go to them and ask them questions. But that's not a specialist, so they wouldn't be. They might not know where to go for those mental health supports or those kind of things. Now, if your child were to have, and you suspect, because if you are suspecting that your child has some sort of learning deficit or needs to get an assessment of some kind, the schools sometimes have funding for a certain amount of kids to have an assessment for 1 year. That number is often very low because of the amount of funding given for those assessments. And often if
District to district.
Yeah, it's different. And often if the parent is concerned and they were to go to a doctor to get those assessments done, they are very expensive. And so,
or a huge wait list.
Exactly. And so those families that can't afford it.
Yeah, there's still a huge socioeconomic gap when we look at learning challenges, mental health challenges, how they present in school, and access to care.
Yeah. And sometimes if those assessments are done, sometimes they're not even recognized by the board, depending on who has completed the assessments. And that's also a challenge. So it's very frustrating for parents.
And for educators.
Yeah.
So to circle back to you, how do you avoid burnout?
So there's a lot of stresses in the classroom setting. And so personally this year, I have decided to step back from being a classroom teacher to give myself a bit of a break. I'm still in the school, but I am teaching all the grades, a gym class or a social studies class, and I'm giving myself that grace period. I want to stay here in a year, at least a year. I might expand it to another year or two, depending on how I'm feeling. But I was feeling a lot of pressure from a lot of areas, and I felt that I needed a break. So going into a position where there's less pressure for a few years kind of gives me a little bit of a breathing space, so then I can clear my head and go back into it. I also really like it because I get to see other classrooms and different strategies, and then it's like a reset of, oh, I like that idea, maybe I should try that next time. And so I can go into a homeroom class again with a fresh idea and new ideas. I also, my husband and I have recently purchased a family farm. And so I find I need to really just take a break, step back from work, and I need to leave work at work and home at home. I find that as teachers, you really care about your quality of what you are doing because you really care about the kids. So you are putting in so much effort to make sure each lesson is effective and you are letting them grasp as much information. So by doing that, it takes a lot of your time. And by planning for so many different levels at the same time or so many different needs, you're often staying late at work. So making sure you give yourself some time to step back and say, okay, this is good. We're going to take a break, come back and look at it with fresh eyes in the morning. And then I will go home and I go for a nice long dog walk. Um, and it's interesting because your brain is still running on that walk.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked about it in some of your other podcasts, but like I will go for a walk to the end of my property, and it's probably a kilometer, and then I will stop at the end and think, oh my gosh, my mind hasn't stopped. Like I'm already at the end of my walk and I'm still like, that was really fast. And I haven't stopped to listen to birds. I haven't looked around to see maybe the sunset. And so I have to pause, turn around, and then make my brain silent on the way back.
Mm.
And then also just picking up things that I enjoy when I'm at home. I really try to step away from doing my marking at home or doing my planning at home. And I got to stop thinking about all the crazy things that happen during the day and really just enjoy my time. Maybe my husband and I are dealing with our cows or watering the chickens or doing life and things that take my brain off of that and clear my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I found doing that has really, really made a difference in how my attitude towards being at work is. And that says a lot because I really love my job.
Yes.
It is something that I'm very passionate about. It is something that I really, really want to do. And in the last few years, well, since COVID, probably I was waking up and finding this is I don't want to go to work today.
Yeah.
And that's really hard for me to say. I really love being there and I really love those kids. And so stepping back and letting myself step back has made a huge difference.
And that was just having to deal with all of the complexities all at once.
Right.
Do you feel like there was more after COVID?
Well, because there's so much that changes every year. Curriculum is always changing, and the science behind being an effective educator is changing, and so the constant changing. And then you have different assessments from different levels. You have your board and your board level assessments, your government level assessments, and you have all those things. And then the pressure of having those kids be successful and making sure that even when you have a bad day, because maybe you have something with your health is happening, maybe you're feeling sick that day or have a migraine, or maybe something at home isn't right, and you have to go to school and put on a face and smile for those kids because they don't know what's going behind the scenes, and they deserve happiness and feeling loved and being there because, like I said, one of my biggest takeaways is you might be their only happy face. So having that face on and all the other pressures, it is a lot. Giving your time away and really enjoying your time and your things, I think has made a huge difference.
Yes. And so if there's one thing that you would advocate for from your own experience of having to take that step back to better support teachers, what would that be?
I would love, in an ideal world, I would love more funding given to educators for a few things. I would like to see resources because right now there's a lot of searching on your own and creating your own lessons and trying to figure out the best way to teach what the curriculum is asking. So a specific resource that gives you the lessons and takes out all the guesswork and makes it the same all around. That would be ideal. But also funding for those kiddos that need specialized classes, or those kids that have disabilities or learning deficits. And I think having the extra supports and the funding to support them emotionally would be huge.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up one at the start when we were chatting before recording, and I'd like to just finish off with that because I think I can speak to it from my side as a parent and someone that works with parents a lot too. And we were talking about, I said recently I've had a lot of conversations with educators. And one of the educators I was speaking to is now educating educators. And they were saying that they're seeing, specifically in their province, very slow evolution in what it is we are teaching educators before they show up in the classroom. And one of those, because they said it's very similar to what I did in my degree, which was like 30 years ago. And I want to add more specifically around behavior and how to support families. And one piece, and I said, how do you feel about that? And you said, well, actually, your degree and the degrees that you're seeing new educators coming into your school with do seem to be quite up to date with the evolution that we're seeing in our students. But one thing that we were saying we wish we knew was how to communicate with parents better or effectively and when to communicate with them. And then one of the things that I hear from parents all the time is, I don't like how much the school tells me, or the school doesn't tell me enough. And so I see it like for teachers, I'm like, oh gosh, like that is a kind of a lose-lose situation. But also for parents, it feels a bit like a lose-lose. And they'll have favorite educators based on how much they communicate or don't communicate. And so it's interesting because I don't know if there would be specific training for that other than one piece I would love for teachers or schools to have, so it wasn't just up to every individual teacher to do, is just have this little start of the year piece where we could survey parents on how they like, what is the best mode of communication, but also what they like to have shared with them. Because some parents, like me, when I was saying, like, I want learning to be fun at home, I don't want to know specifically what I should be pushing my child through or on. I just want my space to be this very fun, like we read together, we journal together, we do those things. But some parents want to know those specific benchmarks, specific activities that they could be doing to help them move academically further. Some want to know about every behavior challenge. Some don't until it is at a point where the school is like, hey, we need additional support. And I'm curious, just as a closing, what you think about that.
It'd be, I think, lovely for programs for new teachers to come out to hear about how to communicate with parents and what you communicate with. Personally, I like to give the phone calls to all the parents at the beginning of the year, just to check in, try to figure out what the families are like, see what interests those kids so I can base some of my lessons off of their own kids' interests. And then I want to also let the parents know their successes, because often when a parent gets a phone call, they're, oh no, this is the school. What has my kid done? What is he needing work on? And it can be a little anxiety inducing, and knowing that, oh, they're doing actually really well. Oh, that's so nice to hear. And sometimes that's the good news that they need in the day, is hearing, oh, your kid was struggling with this earlier, but oh, they really got it today. And I just wanted to let you know they've been working so hard and it's showing.
It is. Imagine if, I'm just thinking back to this, because you're right. Like if I got that phone call as a parent, or when I have, like,
I hope you have.
but anytime, yes, that has been so wonderful. It's been such a fun celebration with my kids. And I remember making those calls as an educator, but it was so difficult because you don't have time in a day to do that. And so it's like 3:30. I'm panicking to make daycare pickup for my own child, and I'm trying to figure out how to have a phone call. And if that was a kind of supported time during the day, hey, have you done your monthly celebration of the wins with this family? No? Okay, Edmund's going to come into your class and give you 1 hour to
Oh my
call.
gosh. That would be amazing, but I don't think that's the top of their priorities. There's so many things that they would need to support teachers with before have you called those parents.
Yeah, and I hear that, and it's just so hard for me to hear it too, because I completely agree with you that it isn't the top of their priorities. But as a mental health professional, knowing that if we build that foundation of celebration, which starts with the modeling from the parents to the kids, the decrease in challenging behaviors, like as a systemic change, it would be huge.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it
Yeah.
is a really important thing that that teachers do communicate, and that's why I do it. But the thing is, you are doing it on your own time. So you're doing it on your lunchtime, you're doing it on your prep time, or you're doing it before or after school. And I see how important it is, and that's why we do it. It's
Yeah,
not a required thing. It's not something that we have been told you have to do. Um,
but it
but it
should.
is a piece that is so important, and parents do need to be in the loop because with their kids are at school the majority of the day, and often if your kid is in daycare or other things, often that teacher is actually seeing the kid longer when that kid is awake than the parents see them awake.
And many kids struggling with school have had parents that have had a hard relationship with school. And
Yeah.
so are you healing that school wound for that kid or preventing it from being formed? You're healing for the parent. And so you're more likely to get the parent on your team. So I think I want to wrap up just by saying, like, anyone that's admin, anyone that's in a board position, any teacher or union professional that's trying to advocate, like that tiny change of having a once a month celebration email or phone call and giving teachers time to do that would make a very drastic difference in the lives of many students.
Yep, I
My
agree.
okay.
I agree. It would be amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Rachel, I really, really want to thank you for coming on and speaking to me. I know that this is a very challenging thing for teachers to do, and I really, really appreciate it because I meet so many educators like you that are drawn to the profession because you care so much, because you had your own challenges as a student and you wanted to help change the system from the inside by teaching how you wish you were taught. And I hear that you're doing that. And I know from people that have interacted with that your strategies have been so effective and so helpful, and you're a cherished teacher. And so I'm so grateful to have your voice on here. And I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on. It was a really exciting experience.
All right. I'm gonna sign off here. Thank you everyone for listening, and stay tuned for next week's podcast where we will be talking to another professional on the front line in a caring role, and learning some tips and tricks that we can bring into our own daily lives, whether that's in our position as a frontline professional or as a parent or a caregiver.